I am now live. It's so much better just now. But Conversations with Coaches, this will be episode 6. We're going to be joined by Chris Bridgeford, who, as I mentioned in the description yesterday, was a D1 level wrestler, cauliflower ears and all. He's deadlifted 900 pounds in both stances, which is pretty damn impressive. He just hopped on. We're going to hit the join request. We'll be out here in a second. Usually takes like 3 to 5 seconds to go through, and maybe I'll slow down my speech between now and then, and maybe I won't. We'll see. Well, usually it's faster than that. Let's take it so long. Hopefully I hit the right button. But there we go. We got him. All right. Yeah, I got Chris. What's happening, Chris?
Not a whole lot. How are you?
I am great. So I want to preface this with how I actually met Chris, because it's a fun story that I tell all the time.
It's been like
Chris competed at the U.S. Open and didn't have a great day on that day. And I was working with Jake at the time and Kyle at the time, Jens at the time. And Chris comes up to the airport and he's flying to Florida with his girlfriend at the time. And I'm, of course, flying back to Florida. Chris lives in the Pacific Northwest. And he just sits down like in front of me, a little dejected feeling from a poor meet. And he looks at me, he's like, I know you. And I'm like, yeah, I work with Jake Cowell. He's like, yeah. He's like, you're the guy who's like really familiar with deadlifts, right? I'm like, yeah. He's like, did you see my deadlifts? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, what do you think I did wrong? And my dumbass, because I hadn't slept in like 4.5 days of all the hysterics and things going on, like unloads on everything I saw on his deadlift in like the not politest way possible. Just like no filter, no compliment sandwich, just like shit canned him. And then I look up at his ears because I'm still seated, and they're like cauliflowered, and I'm like, fuck. But instead of beating my ass like he could have, Chris just looks over and he's like, see, no one tells me these things. These are the things I need to hear. Which was like awesome for me because I didn't die that day and he didn't kill me. But also awesome because that's something I really love about, I don't care how high of a level athlete you are or how high of a level athlete you coach or how high of a coach you are, be willing to hear things, some areas where you can improve upon. And in that time frame from there to here, Chris has improved as an athlete, as a coach, as a businessman, as a business person with the gym, as a friend. Like it's established a really great connection between him and I by him being open to hearing constructive criticism at his lowest point instead of being frustrated and pissed off on it. And, I served him some questions about his program at the time. I won't mention who was doing it because I don't want to be disrespectful to anybody. But I was like, hey, I can tell that your upper back is not strong enough compared to the rest of your deadlift of your legs. What kind of row work are you doing? What kind of horizontal rowing are you doing? And he looked back over 12 weeks of program and was like, holy shit, I've done none.
It was like,
yeah, it had been an easy oversight. So going to the meet, he wasn't the most prepared. But I've always admired that trait in individuals when they can take constructive criticism without an emotional reaction. That's the sign of greatness, because everyone who wants to be something special, who wants to be something significant, is going to have to face a point where it gets challenging, it gets tough, and someone's going to come in and remind them of what they could be doing, they're not doing, or what they could grow to. And that's why I've always had the utmost respect for Chris, because even in his worst, he was willing to listen to how he could be better. So kudos to you for not kicking my ass. And of course, it's grown into a hell of a friendship. Chris calls me dad. I'm still not going to let him borrow the car though, because I don't think he drives very well.
yeah, it's been a fun 5 years now?
5 years.
Yeah. 5.
So let's go from that moment, because shortly after that moment, you really stepped up your level of education. So I want to go from there. You really stepped up your level of coaching. And over those 5 years, you have incredibly stepped up a level of commitment by bringing in people to educate you on nutrition, on movement patterns and performance and peaking strategies in every aspect from many different people, not just one. So you've got that Ronin model where you don't have one master, you have many, and then you test and apply and create systems that work for you with your athletes. So let's go from the first aspect of where you were 5 years ago. What was the main thing that you changed as an athlete first? And then let's go over what did you change as a coach second?
Oh, boy. Yeah, so quite the life story here. Yeah, you kind of touched on it a little bit there. I think, the biggest thing, like you said, was I call it like being coachable, essentially like what you just described. The theme around my like athletic career, if that's what you want to call it, is I've always been behind the curve. The first, 3-4 years of my powerlifting career before I met you, there was not a lot of coaching coming in. It was more so just like, I knew I was strong. I didn't necessarily train the best. And you were actually the second coach I ever worked with, coming after the coach I was working with, prior to you going into that US Open. So, a similar theme with my entire, wrestling career. I didn't start wrestling until I was in 8th grade. My freshman year of high school, I moved to a high school where the wrestling coach ended up getting inducted into the the Iowa High School Athletic Hall of Fame across all sports. So he was an amazing coach. It was actually 3 brothers. They're the Kirsten brothers. There's 3 brothers, and they all coached together. And, I was wrestling kids in practice that had been wrestling since they were 3-4 years old. And so I was getting my ass beat every single day in practice. And, the only way I got better was by, being told how dog shit everything I was doing was. And then, similar theme, coming into working with you, the only thing that, allowed me to make that next step was being told that what I was doing was, pretty dog shit. We learned what T-spine extension was after meeting you.
If you don't know, if you have been following for 5 years, like the first video that I put up that went like super viral was hips is the dumbest cue ever. It's thoracic extensions, the reason why you can't lock out your deadlift. And it was before IG videos and reels. It was in like 5 different segments of 60 seconds. And that like went everywhere. That even started my connection to Andy Huang. He's like, this is the greatest video I've ever seen on deadlifting. Because people didn't know what that was.
Yeah. Like literally last week, I got a message from a client that he said, it's weird. My hips are in a better position when I focus more on my upper back. Yep. I was just like, where have you been the last 5 years? Like we've been talking about this for a little while. So, after I worked with you, after I started working with you, I recognized how, again, similar theme with other things in my life, I was a little, behind the curve with my coaching. And, I realized how much I didn't know. I was definitely one of those people where my start of coaching was more so brought on by my Instagram reach and not my credentials. Like I'm perfectly okay with admitting that. I got clients because I was strong and because, of the following that I was getting and because people thought that what I was doing was cool. Not because I had a history of coaching people and doing a good job of it, not because I produced world records or anything like that. So, after I started working with you, it was like, okay, I don't know what any of this stuff does. I don't know why, my hips do this when this happens, or, I don't know why my body responds this way when I have an imbalance here, anything. So, I ended up, hopping into the pre-script courses shortly after my quad repair, because that happened, of course, about 1.5 years later. I had the quad injury. So I hopped into the pre-script barbell course, which was ran by Stu, of course. Amazing course. He's really, really smart, but I'll never directly give him that compliment to his face.
It's not intelligent, but you should take the course anyways. Yeah. Because it's phenomenal.
Don't trust anybody from Canada. I think we all know that by now. So then following that, I actually hopped into the level 1 course that they offer, which was another, very eye-opening experience, but it allowed me to, kind of expand what, I'm able to offer as a coach, where I could confidently, I'm not a physical therapist by any means, but I can, confidently assess what is going on with a lifter, whether, they're having pain, not able to perform a certain movement, or we see some kind of like technical breakdown in the lift. So, outside of that, I would say that I've been able to learn from some really top level people. I've worked with you. I've worked with Paul O'Need. I've worked with Tony a little bit. always, same thing with you, I'll, bugging him over the years, shooting him random messages. Dave Osborne, who, I had been working with for about a year and a half leading up to the beginning of this year. All really smart people, all people that are, willing to share, everything they've learned. And I got to learn, a number of different approaches to, this game that we play, and kind of, pick and pull, things that, kind of stuck with me, after seeing it and trying to apply it a little bit differently. And not just with, programming methodology, things like that, communication as well. And not just communicating, but communicating, with the individual. I can't remember where I heard this. You might have even said it at some point. But I hear this all the time, and I repeat this to people. It's like, nobody cares what you have to say. Nobody cares how smart you are if they don't want to listen to you.
Yes, absolutely. Doesn't matter what you know if they're not willing to hear it. Absolutely.
And that really stuck. So, learning how to communicate, learning how to like make the correction with the client, or get the point across or get them to buy in. Nobody cares about, which muscle is, responsible for, what's happening at the hip. Nobody cares about how many degrees of internal rotation, whatever. It's okay. How can we make this stick? How can I explain this in a way that makes sense? So, that was a big one as well. Just like I said, outside of, the programming itself and, all of that was just getting better at communicating and, communicating with the individual. Because, going back to what you said earlier with, the way, how we met the first time, that's how I've always been, through wrestling, getting to powerlifting. I'm a very independent athlete. I want to know what I'm doing wrong, and I don't necessarily need praise when I do something right. I'm more so like, tell me what the task is, and I'm going to figure out a way to get it done. I'm going to figure out a way to figure it out. Like when I was in high school, I used to YouTube wrestling takedowns, and then I would work on them with my coaches after practice. My coaches used to be willing to stay after practice with me so I could drill takedowns and just, improve. So, I was, like I said, I was more of an independent athlete, and a big realization for me, coming into powerlifting coaching is that people aren't a lot of people are not like that.
Right.
A lot of people do need some reassurance. People do need to be told that they did something right. So that was probably the biggest obstacle, or I'd say, realization moment for me, through, coaching and, this last 5 years, was, learning how to, separate the way I might view things as an individual from the athlete side, in comparison to what somebody else, how they might feel in a situation.
Yeah.
So
you can't expect everyone to be you. Like you said, you did independent study, independent application, and just needed eyes to let you know if you're doing things right or wrong. And that is a communication level that a lot of people struggle with. Is okay. Case in point, we were having a conversation yesterday about the role of the hamstrings in the squat, because like me, you probably get a lot of intake. People think, I think my hamstrings are weak in the squat. It's like, okay, if you're going to make that claim, can you tell me how the hamstrings function in a squat? No. So why are you identifying them as a weakness? So for those who don't know, the maximum voluntary contraction of the hamstrings in a squat is mostly happening during the eccentric, and it's 20% of maximal, on average, 20% of maximal voluntary contraction, and it's happening during the eccentric. It's stabilizing the pelvis while you're sitting down. So Chris was in the process of shooting an educational video, wanted to make sure he worded this correctly, and that's what we were talking about, because he didn't want to word it like I just did, because no one's going to pay attention to that. It was like, how can I get them to understand that hamstrings stabilize during the movement? And that was the conversation we were having. And that's a huge point from both athlete and coach perspective, is they're not going to listen unless they can comprehend it, and they're not going to listen unless they want to learn it.
Right. That was, that's probably like my biggest focus across any video that I've ever done. Whether it's, we've done them on the gym YouTube before. I'll post them on my page as well. That's why I probably bug you once a month saying like, hey, like, just here, because The last thing that I want to see, the last thing that I want to watch, you know, when I'm going through YouTube or going through Instagram is a 12-minute video that can be explained in 3 minutes. And I've had this conversation with, you know, people that I've worked with over and over again, you know, is like, okay, that sounds great. And there is an audience for that. But you need to make the connection that, like, if that's not the audience that you're targeting, then like you need to, you know, kind of, for the lack of a better way to phrase it, like dumb it down a little bit. But just, you know, people are more likely to listen to something and absorb something if they're enjoying listening to it and watching it, which is, you know, one thing that like I've loved about your videos over the years, not to kiss your ass. It's like you joke around in the videos, you know, stutter, you're talking fast, and it's, you know, still the information is, you know, one of a kind, right? So, yeah, that's the biggest thing I try to avoid is like repeating things or, you know, trying to get way too specific about one thing when it's, you know, going back to what we said earlier, like people don't necessarily care about that. If you can explain it in a way that's going to, you know, actually make a change for them in their training, you know, week to week, then that's probably the route that you're better off going with.
I actually give 12 minutes of information in 3 minutes simply because I talk fast. I love that. Yeah, I love that. I've had this conversation with Chloe frequently, often, about, you know, if you can't simplify something, you probably don't understand something. And if you can't simplify it, the athlete won't understand it either. And if you want them to buy into it, it has to make sense.
Yeah.
All right, so that's the evolution and genesis of how you change as an athlete by seeking out multiple resources, learning as much as you could, getting actual courses and barbell course and prescript level 1. There I am talking fast again. Let's talk about how you've learned to apply that, because we had a breakfast once in Illinois for the Surge Meet, and you talked about creating systems that helped you manage your flow of athletes, which was, you know, using the Train Heroic platform, having certain check-in times. So you notice when you get busy, because a lot of people talk about the volume of athletes I have, like how you manage it, you have to create systems. It's no longer a hobby. It has to become systemized to some degree, and you can't be available to everyone all day, every day. It just doesn't work that way. That's somebody who has 12 clients, not somebody who has 80, you know? So let's talk about your systems in play. What do you like to use and how do you structure or organize it? So let's say you have a new client coming in. How do they reach you? Intake form.
So I have intake forms. I don't have one available directly through a link or anything like that. It's just simply through, I have a consultation link where people can, so I do a phone call, you know, a video call or phone call with every new client now. I have a real conversation with them before we begin any sort of like program building or anything like that. So, you know, that's available like directly through my Instagram page. So they schedule the consult call. I schedule that. I send them the questionnaire before the phone call. That way I can review all that information on the phone call. You know, if they put injury history, training history, things like that, I have all that information beforehand so we can discuss it over the phone. It's like, okay, you know, you're used to a more high frequency approach. You know, how long have you been training that way? What did you like about it? What didn't you like about it? You know, you said that the last 3 months you've been dealing with some more, you know, tendonitis, bumps and bruises, things like that, that wasn't present before. So there's a possibility it might be associated with the fact that you're trying to squat 3 times a week. I don't know, maybe. So that was a big change that I made. Instead of just, you know, expecting people to DM me, you know, like, hey, do you have any spots open? You know, so if they want to contact me in regards to coaching, like that is the only place where they can do it, through that link. Train Heroic was a big change for me as well. I started using that back in 2019, I believe. So it makes program writing a lot more enjoyable for me, for one. I would much prefer to use that layout than looking at a spreadsheet. On the client end of things, from what I've been told overall, it's, you know, a lot more enjoyable for them to you know, look at the app on their phone. It actually allows people to log their weights and, you know, the things they're doing in the training session a lot easier. I know not everybody likes to be on their phone when they're training, but I've found that, you know, because I used to have people log stuff on a spreadsheet, the ability to get somebody to log all their weights and, you know, the RPE and all those things attached to a certain exercise was a lot more consistent through Train Heroic than it ever was on a spreadsheet. And, you know, they can leave comments and things like that as well. I can also lay out a much more detailed explanation to an exercise through Train Heroic than on a spreadsheet. So programs are sent through Train Heroic. I entirely use WhatsApp for communication now, just because I have, you know, too many personal messages coming through on iMessage. I don't have notifications set for Instagram just because, you know, there's more than just clients messaging me on Instagram. So,
Yeah, that's the downside when you start to get a following is it messages you. And if you're not familiar with Instagram, it will only house the last 20 messages that came in and then gets rid of the other ones and hope that you'll interact with old messages that are still there. So it can get a little frustrating when your inbox on Instagram is full and people are like, hey, you see my message from Wednesday? I'm like, no, it got pushed out like 2 days ago.
So I use WhatsApp just because I have it on this laptop right here. So I'll have WhatsApp on my laptop, and then I'll have my programs on this computer. So I can, you know, work 2 screens at once instead of like getting on my phone, you know, while I'm, you know, running through things. A big part too was I set like designated office hours for myself. So I'm on my phone a lot less, you know, like when I'm with Courtney or when I'm on my, you know, doing my own training. You know, obviously, like I'll, you know, sometimes when I have people like in a peak or whatever, I won't prescribe a specific weight, and, you know, they'll schedule a time with me where they'll send me their last warm up, and then I'll call their top set weight for the day. That's definitely not the norm. I don't do that every day, week to week, you know, throughout the year. But, you know, I try to, you know, provide that for people that are peaking for competition, just because, you know, if there was like a situation where I would call a specific number, like, you know, live or however you want to word it for a lifter, it could be during that phase of training. So yeah, I set office hours for myself. It's usually, you know, I get to the gym around 10 o'clock. So, you know, I start working at home for a little bit. So it's usually from like 9 to like, you know, 3 or 4, you know, that's like, if you're a client and you message me during those like 7 hours, you're going to get a pretty fast response. You know, stuff starts coming in, you know, after, you know, around 7 o'clock, I just respond to it the next day. So, which I think is, you know, perfectly fair because, you know, it's a 24-hour turnaround expectation. So, you know, if people are sending me videos at 8 or 9 o'clock at night, they're going to get responses the next morning. So,
meanwhile, because time zone differences, Chris likes to text me at 10 p.m. But it's 7. That's when he's done working. So when office hours close is when Chris starts messaging me. I'm done talking to Trevor.
But
to be at least 15% of the videos and tutorials I've done have been inspired by conversations with Chris. So
that's the creative hour, right? That's when the creative juices flow is late at night. At the end of the day, when you
everything that pops in my head when I'm in the shower, I need like some kind of waterproof note taker when I'm in the shower, because that's when the moments of inspiration hit, and then by the time I wake up in the morning, it's gone.
Very frustrating with, you know, content creating. As much as I hate that phrase, is forgetting an idea. You know, so you just need to make sure you write it down. So I have like a notes thing on my phone where I try to like write down ideas, or if I hate writing out Instagram captions. I'm not a big fan of writing, you know, and putting together, you know, a very like aesthetic looking post.
But a couple, you're like, hey, fix this.
So like I have to like piece it together. Otherwise, if I try to do it all at once, it's just like too overwhelming. But that's just like my lack of enjoyment of social media in general, I think contributes to that. So the social media game with coaching has definitely been a learning process. And, you know, kind of going back, like we were talking about growth, that's the theme of the whole conversation. You know, you were a big help in that over the last few years. Because I remember the first video that I ever posted that was, informative. Like, I didn't even want to post it. I felt so dumb after I recorded that video, and I sent it to you, and then you posted it before I did.
Bring the bar with you.
Yep.
I remember it. Still sharp up here.
Yeah, so I had this, crazy imposter syndrome because you were already posting videos every week, and it was very intimidating. So I was like, damn, so I did this video and I sent it to you, and you're like, just fucking post this, stop, just fucking post it. And now I'm saying the same thing to people. I talk to Brian on a weekly basis here. We'll get into our own rants about training. We have very similar conversations. And why don't you tell this to people? This is something you should tell people. And he's like, really? I'm like, yeah, dude. You're really fucking smart.
Any prospective client gonna know you can help them if you can't demonstrate it? And that's what I always coaches is it's not a matter of the quality of the content. It's not even a matter of the content. It's just a matter of being able to speak your truth and being able to speak to the matter is going to let them know that this person isn't just saying DM me for coaching and they're going to send you some stock program or blanket thing. They're actually going to look at your issues and address them. That's the difference in individualized coaching versus just a programmer. Is someone's going to address your issues and needs by looking at your videos and being able to explain to you how they can help you.
That's the biggest thing I tell people in context of trying to get more clients is I'll look through their page and I'm like, okay, well, there's nothing on here that shows me what you can do as a coach. And I'm like, okay, you post every week that you have spots available. That's great. You sound like a used car salesman. That's great that you're taking on clients and that you want to work with people and you're eager to work with people. But to me, that would tell me that person is trying to get new clients every week. Because I've done the same thing before. I've had the ability to take on 2 clients, but then I took on 3 or 4 because I had the space to do so, and I wanted the money, right? And I was able to handle the workload. I saw that was a comment.
Gracie V. Infamous Gracie V wants to know about breath work. She said you've talked about breath work. Actually, it's an interesting one because I know you've worked on this, I think with Sam, who might also be on this. Sam Locke introduced you to breath work as a way of bringing your heart rate down and VO2 max conditioning and getting used to that. So it's not a bad topic to bring up. So thank you, Gracie, for that one. Hope she's well. Let's talk on breath work and how you utilize that as an athlete and as a coach.
Yeah. So that was, like you said, that was introduced to me by Sam Locke, who is a really good friend of mine. He trained at the gym for a while. Him and his family actually just moved back to Australia. So Sam, again, another person that I was lucky to work with over the years. He was an amazing resource to me while I was at the gym. And, similar theme here, he was willing to share his information and his knowledge with everybody that was willing to hear it, which seems to be a common thing with all these people that I look up to. So great guy. So he had originally introduced it to Brian, who was starting to implement it into his routine. And then I was a little late to the party, and then I was getting back into being competitive again. After the quad injury. Training was back to normal. Squats felt like they did pre-injury, and I was just looking at ways to maximize what I was doing away from training. I kind of I came to the realization that looking at things prior, leading up to my injury, my overall lifestyle wasn't very healthy. I averaged 2,000 to 3,000 steps a day, at best. I didn't do any hiking. I didn't do any of the stuff that you see me doing now. And I would greatly attribute my day-to-day routine and my lifestyle now to the influence of Sam and other people as well. So the big focus there with implementing breath work was to improve, was to improve my recovery. I was looking at ways to improve my sleep because I was sleeping terrible. I had terrible lifestyle habits. I had no sort of sleep routine, sleep hygiene. I was, started using a Whoop, which Sam actually gave to me. My sleep quality was terrible, so he suggested implementing breath work into my routine pre-bed and first thing in the morning when I wake up. That was like what we started with, and even that was a process to make a routine, right? You talked about routine a lot on your page, in your videos, in your podcasts. That was something, it took a while for it to stick for me because I'm like really big on visually seeing like the change, like when I implement something. And it took a little while for me to notice the improvement from implementing it, but it was mostly just because I wasn't being consistent with it. Like the intent wasn't there. So I started implementing it, right before bed, first thing in the morning. And of course, over the course of a couple months, I started seeing, the sleep average slowly going up, the resting heart rate, HRV, all those other important metrics, they were all trending in the right directions. I think like when I first started using a Whoop and I first started implementing the breath work, when Sam kind of, suggested it, I think my resting heart rate stayed in like the 60s to low 70s. And then, eventually, got it down to like the low 50s pretty consistently. Overall, like.
You do morning and night breath work first thing in the morning before bed, you said. Are they the same protocol before each?
No, so I think I remember like the exact like cadences. I think pre-bed it was like a 4-second inhale followed by a 12-second hold. Like you hold your breath for 12 seconds and then an 8-second exhale. So it was a very, very slow breath cycle, and like the exhale being like what felt like the longest part. Like it was really easy to hold my breath for 12 seconds, but exhaling really, really, really slow was really difficult to do. But like over time, like getting, and doing it more and more and more and getting used to it, like I could almost feel my heart rate slowing down as I did it. And then in the morning, I would do a little bit of a shorter one. I think it was a 4-second, it was like 4-4-8-4. So it was like a 4-second inhale, a 4-second hold, 8-second exhale, and then a 4-second hold on empty.
Which a lot of people commonly call like box breathing.
Like breathing. So, implemented that into my daily routine. And then we go like over the course of like 2021, going into last year when I started planning on prepping for the American Pro, he introduced me to some other like meditation protocols. So I started doing, it's called non-sleep deep rest. Huberman has, popularized it as well. He's talked about it multiple times on his podcast. So I started doing that. If I had, a few hours to clear out in the day, where if I had the opportunity to take a nap, which was pretty rare, I would do that, and that would kind of allow me to like unwind like early afternoon. Like let's say I'm done with my programming or whatever for the day and checking with clients. I want to relax for a little while before I go train. I would do that, and then I would also do that before bed as well instead of the breath work, because I would play this like little video on my phone. It was a meditation protocol, and it would just knock me out every night.
So let's talk about that real quick, because people don't understand the credibility of this. So a lot of people watching this are powerlifters, CrossFitters, strongmen. Sam Locke is an Olympic level athlete, if I'm not mistaken, in Heroes Crew.
Yeah, so he has world records on the row machine as an individual rower. I was literally just talking to him the other day because I was trying out a 2K row, which I told you to try. And
told me to take like a 2K row for time or something like that. I'm like, I gotta go a week.
2K row like well under 6 minutes.
Yes. Which
is, if anybody's used a rower before, like that is insane, and that is a long time on a rower. And he has multiple world records on the row machine, and he was an Olympic rower as well. They competed. He's a 2-time Olympic rower.
So, we get a lot of like jokes on how we discredit powerlifting as not being athletes and whatnot, but you can look at that at the Olympic level he's competing at, the world records he's competing at, the achievements he has, and he places such an emphasis on breathing, meditation, and recovery. It's not the work output everybody wants to do. Everyone wants to do more, and that's actually how Chris had his quad injury, because he was trying to do too much. And like you said, the lifestyle wasn't keeping up. It's one of those things like, hey, if you really want to get better in every aspect of life, work on the recovery aspect more so than anything else, because that's how you're going to excel, because we can redline only so much, blow up.
Yeah, and like you said too, is the training especially. I remember when I started with you, and I was like 70%.
Yeah.
Really? Sure.
I'm a sub-max weight guy. I block.
But then everything to follow. You see a lot of, and my philosophy is very similar nowadays. I have people that when we get into peaking, they're like, you only want me to hit 93%, like you don't want me to try to PR. I was like, you PR on the platform. Yeah. Like if you can PR in the gym leading up to a meet, then great. Like you're probably in that beginner to intermediate stage. But I've been lucky enough to work with like a good amount of high-level lifters at this point. And I have this conversation regularly where it's like, hey, like you need to come to the realization now that you're at this point in your career where you're going to be PRing in the meet, not in the gym.
I was in a conversation with Roman, RFD Physics, RFD Physics on here, and we talk about that. It's like, if you're leaving it in the gym, there's nothing left for the platform. And the only place it really counts is the platform. It doesn't necessarily count in the gym. If we're training up to things, I'd rather see rep PRs, or volume accumulation PRs than see an absolute load PR all the time, because you're going to burn yourself out before you get to the platform. You're leaving no room to grow.
Right. And our first peak together, talking with you, I've referenced that to so many people at this point. The first peak I had with you, my heaviest squat in training was 770, and I squatted 843 in the meet. My heaviest pull in that peak was 832, and I almost pulled 903.
A split lost balance at 881. Yeah. I was like, he went 8 for 9, but he went like 8.9 for 9.
That's to this day, that was my best meet. That was my best peak.
Which is hilarious. He fell over because it was too easy. Like it came up so much faster than he expected. Yeah.
Well, I hit 859 on my second attempt, and Garrett was there calling my attempts. Who, Garrett, great handler, great guy to have around on meet day. Probably one of the only people I trust to wrap my knees to. He was like, let's go 881 for your third. And I was like, fuck you. We're going 903. Like, I was like, no, 903. Tell him 903. Like, that's what I came here for. So I kind of fucked up the 859 a little bit. The same thing that happened on the 903 happened on the 859. I just was able to, caused a lot of issues. Like if you go back and I don't think you can now, but on the live stream for that meet, people were pissed because I got the down command and they thought the down command was early, but like I barely like held up enough, and then I still fell forward when I went to set it down. I still fell forward. So the same thing happened on my second attempt. So Garrett was like, you lost your balance a little bit. Like maybe we should go 881. I was like, nope, 903. And sure enough, I fucked it up. So
the whip used to catch you, and I know that's been an issue with the CwC bar, trying to learn that whip in position. We modified grip a little bit, which has helped a lot, and just slowed the start a little bit down because it flexes differently. And so that's another aspect as an athlete. People often ask, do you care what bar they use? No, I've done meets that have a Texas bar. I've done meets that have a CwC bar. I don't care what bar they use, but I'm going to make sure that I understand what I have to change to adapt to the equipment they use. I can't expect the meet to change for me.
Right. And that's like, you can worry about that to a point, but like if you're more worried about that than like the other things you need to do to execute, then like I think that's problematic, because I've used Texas bars that feel night and day different. Mm-hmm. I've used Texas deadlift bars that feel like a power bar, and I've I swear to God, I've used Texas bars that feel just as whippy as the Kabuki bars. So it's like, you can put your focus on that. I do understand, with the Kabuki bar, like being able to train on one before using one in a competition is probably a good idea. Because I have seen that happen to a few people, because there was kind of like a back, whatever the term is for it not being available, back order on the Kabuki bar.
Lead time is what they tell people. We have a 6 lead time, which turns out that they can wait 6 weeks for them to even process your order, and then you got to wait for them to actually build it and send it.
Wouldn't be the first time I've heard this.
Yeah.
So, I understand, wanting to use one before having to compete on one, but I think if that's the main focus, then just worry more about lifting the weight. We could all just compete on power bars. That would be cool.
I'd be fine.
Yeah.
I would adapt. 4 days on
slack. So.
Yeah, I love lifting, and I don't care what they give me to lift on. I'm going to lift. That's what I'm here to do. I'm here to lift, not complain. So I'm with you. As an athlete, there's another component. As an athlete, that level of adaptability, and a lot of people don't want that adaptability. They'll go out of their way for a monolift only meet or 3-meter reps meet, and then they bitch and moan online that people don't respect them the same as so-and-so who did this meet. It's like, because you're going for the easy route. You don't have that adaptability as an athlete. I understand if that's the only meet you can afford to go to, it's the only local meet. But if you have the opportunity and you're going around the different meets and you're purposely finding easier meets or, less credible judges, that's on you. That's not on the people who are watching. And so if you're getting judged by it, you don't like it, it's your fault. You don't want to adapt. You don't want to challenge yourself.
Well, if people want powerlifting to be looked at as a real sport, then it has to be looked at more like a real sport. And then the competitiveness has to be there. And, athletes aren't pampered to the same degree in other sports in terms of what you just described, where it's I'm going to make sure I only compete where I know there's going to be a monolift, or I know there's going to be a certain bar, or I know there's only going to be certain judges. I know people that decide where they're going to compete based off that. So it's you just have to show up and deal with the same variables that everybody else does. I don't tell people this a lot, but I raced BMX when I was a kid as well. Me and my dad traveled around all over the place for about 1.5 years. He took a year off work to take me to all these different racing events. We went to Oklahoma, we went to Missouri, we went to Illinois, we went all over. And when you go to a big racing event like that, where you have 300, 400 participants, each age group, each age bracket gets a time slot to practice on the track before it starts. You get 20 minutes. So that's enough to maybe do when you go around the whole, because it's only one lap, it's not motocross. So you get, 20 minutes gets you maybe 3 laps. So you get 3 chances to try out on this track before you actually race. There might be mud in some spots, there might be, a certain, rhythm section that you're not familiar with, but everybody has to race on that same track. Everybody is there dealing with the same thing, which is the case, if you have a slippery deadlift bar at a meet or whatever, somebody got baby powder in the chalk bowl, whatever it is, those are variables that everybody is dealing with. This is the part of competition that you have to come to terms with if you want to be looked at as an athlete.
Yeah. You adapt to whatever the conditions are because you are an athlete. You're correct. Everybody had the same squishy platform or the same whippy bar or, the same strict head judge, whatever it was. Everybody else had the same problem. All right. So we've gone through some great resources. You've learned from Dave. You've learned from Sam Locke. You've learned from Paul. You've learned from Stu, and you've learned from Prescript. Those are all great sources. That covers where you like to get a lot of your information from and where you like to do things from. So as far as a coach, what's your most memorable coaching experience?
My most memorable coaching experience, there's 2. The Surge meet 2021, but when Ed Blair he broke the all-time world record bench done in full meet at 220, and at the time that had been the longest standing record in the sport. I think it was Jim McDonald had it before that.
If you're McDonald created the McDonald bar, which is the first cambered bench bar. It's not U-shaped. It's got an actual big missing piece, so it can go an extra 3 inches of range of motion. I have it in my garage.
Yeah. So that was a big one, not because of the record. You know, getting to coach an all-time world record is awesome. Like, as you know, obviously, Ed is the longest coach-client relationship that I currently have or have ever had. I've been working with Ed before I even officially started to coach, like, and make it my full-time job. So I started working with Ed late 2016, early 2017. I helped him with his training, and then like we both trained at the Iowa State Weight Club when I lived in Ames, and he was just a college meathead. He liked to bench. He did a lot of curls and he liked to bench, but he's always just naturally strong. So I started working with him like officially right before I moved from Iowa to Washington, 2017. So we're coming up on 6 years working together this year. So it was just like, it was something we had talked about for literally years. You know, I told him back when I met him in 2016, I was like, you realize you probably bench 600 pounds someday, right? Like, you have the build for it. Like, you definitely could, but you train like a college kid. And he's like, I don't know, like he's like, I just do it for fun, whatever. And then I just kind of kept telling him that, and here we are, 6 years later, and he's knocking on the door of benching 600 after an elbow surgery. So
he's like student of everyone. I think Ed like pays attention to every single resource out there and takes notes on everyone. He's super meticulous.
He is a very, very intelligent person. So he's an engineer. So he's a very smart person. And I have some very, very dry conversations with him. Like, I can't be sarcastic with him because he's like, wait, are you serious? Like, that was a joke.
He says everything like deadpan, and you don't know if he's kidding or not. Like, there's no expression change when you talk to Ed in person. It's the same expression. It is really funny.
But I love that guy, man. He's been a great friend the last few years. He's been really patient with me too. You know, I've had a lot of growing pains as a coach. I've had a lot of things to figure out. And he's been there, every step of the way. So my other favorite coaching moment would be that getting to share the platform with all of my friends here that helped start the gym. So I got to compete the record breakers where I had my best meet. I got to compete with Brian, who was my business partner these last 4 years. I got to compete with Brianni, who used to train with us here. My old roommates, Jackson and Louie, and those people were all part of like our original training crew. And just getting to compete and like share that experience with everybody. And that was actually right before we like kind of made the decision as a group to start the gym. So that was kind of like the step into the beginning of Generation Strength being a real thing and being talked about and being planned for. So because around that time, because that was November 2018, the gym that we were all training at, the owner was closing it and moving to the East Coast. So it was either drive 40 minutes over to Strength Union, 4 or 5 days a week, or, set up our own spot to train. So, we all competed together there. We all did great. And that was kind of my first like big meet that I coached lifters into. And that was, the meet where Brianni pulled, she pulled 501 in that meet, and then the U.S. Open in 2019 was when she broke the all-time world record, which was actually held by the other person that I coached to do it for it.
That dynamic is like, I think you're like, yeah, okay.
Talked about on Reddit quite a bit. Yeah, my girlfriend at the time, I coached her into the world record deadlift, which was like 556 or whatever. And her and Christy went back and forth for it. And then in 2019, Bree and Christy went head to head again for the world record. And Christy like walks by me like when we're putting in a temp. She's like, "So we're here again, huh?" Like, I was like, I'm not doing this on purpose. But yeah, so that was, that's a big like highlight memory for me, like in my powerlifting career, was getting to, share that meet with everybody and getting to compete with them. Getting to compete with my friends is probably the best that I will do in a competition.
That's literally how I choose meets for the most part now. Is where are my friends going to be? I'm going to be there too.
I definitely resonate with that. Like I can say that there was like a period of time where like it didn't necessarily make sense to me when you competed, or it didn't necessarily not make sense to me when you competed, but like I definitely get it now because like I put a lot of pressure on myself, and I think more than probably a lot of people do based off our conversations about where I'm at in life that I don't necessarily identify as like a power lifter. I just more so enjoy being challenged. So it's really hard for me to do something without putting a lot of fucking pressure on myself to perform at a very high level. So being able to kind of trick myself into just enjoying something and doing it for the sake of enjoying it isn't the easiest thing to do, but I've kind of discovered, from like watching you and trial and error on myself when I compete with my friends or when I train with my friends, and even if we make it a little competitive, I tend to do really, really well in those situations. Otherwise, I put too much pressure on myself. I convince myself that I'm gonna disappoint everybody, and they're gonna be ashamed of me if I don't go 9 for 9. And the typical dramatic powerlifting recap.
It messes people up, but I gotta be honest, like you're the only one who cares. Like you and your coach are the only one who cares how you really do. Everyone just wants to see you come through it happy and healthy and not get hurt. And Chris is talking about this. You see me in meets, like I am the calmest now. Then I would put the same pressure on myself back then. It's like I coach people, I have to perform, I have to go 9. I've never gone 9 for 9, but I'm like I have to go 8 for 9. I have to do this, I have to be up a total. And Chris has seen me in meet, like rip open my hand on an opening deadlift and just sit there with a towel calmly, like not caring, and just rub some dirt on it and go back out there. To a point where I was like so calm, I just like hand Chris a bloody napkin. He's like, ew, gross. Like you should be having fun in the competition, not pressure, because that's when you're going to perform your best. I'm trying not to like jump into surge me because of the FOMO, because all my friends are going to be there. I'll be there, but I'm trying not to like jump into it because you're going to be there. Pat Thicke's going to be there. Chloe's going to be there. I'm like, I'm just dying.
That's my last meet, so I might have to guilt trip you into it.
You might. I'll definitely share a platform with you. I freaking would love that. You know that. Fine, and we'll both be on the same day because it's the pro day. But all right, last question. I love to ask this question to everyone because I like to get a different perspective on people's mindsets. A book that has impacted you that you would recommend to others?
A book?
Yeah. I have bought like 4 books so far from this one question in 6 episodes. The other one's already had.
A book that's like impacted me, like you said.
Any
okay.
Genre of anything.
Recently, I would say my fiance Courtney actually got me this book. It's called Green Lights by Matthew McConaughey. It's like his autobiography. There's a lot of good stuff in there about life and just more or less like kind of similar theme here, like not taking life too seriously. There's a lot of good like one-liners in there too. So that was a really good one that I read recently. Outside of that, I don't have anything else.
Ironically, big fan of breath work as well. And he likes to do breath work in like nature to ground himself and do things. And, the 5 senses of grounding and things like that he's very, very proficient in. And you can see how far that's taken him to not put pressure on himself and to become present in the moment and to breathe things through. Because I know I've heard interviews with him talking about discussing the book, like things don't always go according to plan. And you can dwell on that, or you can just move past it and just let it go so you can keep moving forward. It's like his big thing. He is his characters in a lot of movies of just like, all right, let's go,
Well, it's also like a big reflective process too, where it's like, at the end of the day, it's like, look at what happened and look at what you want to do differently instead of, like you said, sitting there dwelling on it or thinking about like, oh, I wish that wouldn't have happened or I should have done this instead. Well, it's like, you still can do that. You can say, I should have done this, but apply that to the next day instead of just sitting there kind of wallowing in it and saying, like, oh, I wish I would have done this differently. Well, that's why you reflect and then apply.
my goals have rarely matched my timelines for them, but they've all been accomplished and achieved eventually. And that's the key, is like always looking at what I can keep doing it. Like you said, that's great advice, is just because you didn't do it today doesn't mean you can't keep trying to do it tomorrow. That's a phenomenal way to finish this, actually. Dude, I thank you so much for the awesome conversation. I will send you the link to this once it's up on YouTube. It takes like an hour. Of course, it'll be posted. I love that I get to do this, so thank you for joining me. This is so fun because you're encouraging me to jump onto WhatsApp instead of Instagram, because so many other coaches do that, and it does seem so much more simple to have everybody in one spot on the WhatsApp and not have to worry about messages getting pushed out or lost or IG glitches, which are crazy right now. So I appreciate
things on it too. You can do, because I know you've been doing voice messages a lot lately, even with me. So you can do that on WhatsApp as well, and it saves them. Like they don't. I know with iMessage, sometimes they delete, sometimes they don't. So that's why it's easy for me, because I can just hold this right here instead of just type. Because I hate texting, especially coaching feedback, like trying to write out a long message about what they're doing wrong. It's like, I'm just gonna send a voice message. Go.
It's so much easier in voice message to simplify and explain it than it is in messages, because when you start writing about maximum voluntary contraction, and like you said, certain degrees of hip and rotation, they're like, huh? So when it's easier. So cool, I appreciate that. I'm gonna encourage that. So all my clients are gonna be bombarded with, hey, start sending me WhatsApp instead. Blame Chris. All right, guys, thank you for joining us. I will come back next week with a new guest. And Chris, thank you so much. Appreciate it. All right, man, have a great night.
Too.